Hi, and welcome to today's Swegon Air Academy webinar. Change is coming. Are you ready? In order to reach the global climate targets, the building industry needs to contribute. And this Swegon Air Academy webinar will address the need for new ways of doing business in order to minimize embodied carbon in technical installations. And for those of you who are new to Swegon Air Academy, we are a neutral knowledge sharing platform with our own website, www.swegonairacademy.com, where we publish case studies, webinars, articles with updates and insights, and books. 2023 was the hottest year that we have measured on Earth, but probably not for long. That's what the climate director at the WMO at the UN office says when they release the climate report that they make annually this week. And there are some key messages, and some of them are touching into our building industry. That also there are some positives in this report, that renewable energy transition provides some hope, but action needs to be taken faster. Cost of climate inaction is higher than cost of climate action. Renewable energy generation, primarily driven by dynamic forces of solar radiation, wind, and the water cycle, has surged to the forefront of climate action for its potential to achieve decarbonization targets. And in 2023, renewable capacity additions increased by almost 50% from 2022 for a total of 510 gigawatts, the highest rate observed in the past 2 decades. So that's positive. And a lot of things is happening also not only on renewable energy, but also in the building sector as a whole. And today we will focus on technical installations in the building sector. And with me today, I have some excellent speakers. Let me present Laurila, Business Development Manager at Combient Pure. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mirko Sauvan.
Hi, everyone.
Sustainability Manager at Swegon. And Mikael Börjesson, Sustainability and External Relations Director at Swegon.
Thank you.
Welcome to all of you, and welcome also to our online viewers. Please feel free to put questions in our chat during the webinar, and I will direct them to our speakers. The agenda of today's webinar will be linking circularity and technical installations, a property owner's perspective on circularity, and Louna will present Combient Pure Circularity Development Program to us and talk about the findings in that development program. And we will also touch upon the question about managing embodied carbon in practice. How can this be applied? So let's start by handing over to you, Mirko, to get the context of circularity in building installations.
Thank you, Åsa. I'd like to introduce a little bit where and how can we link circularity and technical installations together, and what are some of the underlying trends and mechanics that we can see how these are interlinked. So one almost obvious, I would say, the environmental impact in general is a driver for many developments. Åsa outlined some of them, but also for corporations, environmental impact is increasingly important for their general financial performance. And we see that an increasingly number of legislations take up environmental impact, in many cases in the form of whole life carbon of buildings, and technical installations are a part of that. This kind of whole carbon perspective is usually based on life cycle assessment, or LCAs. But this type of LCAs and analysis is been done traditionally without technical installation, often due to the fact that information data is missing on the impact and the carbon performance of technical installation. But that has changed or is changing recently and going forward. So we see more and more what is actually the impact of technical installations in a building over its life cycle. In many Nordic countries, we start to see legislation increasing up. They introduce reference values and in some cases even maximum values, but you also see that from private actors using these kind of measures for buildings in total, and naturally it comes down to technical installations as well. So, and there is a shift, you can say, coming for technical installation from a carbon perspective. And two terms are important here to understand. Operational carbon, so emissions coming from the energy use over the building's life cycle, but also over the life cycle of a product that is energy consuming. And everything that is not energy use, so to say, from the use phase, you can call embodied carbon. In simple terms, you can say it's material related. And why is that changing? What is the shift? Well, the shift is towards embodied carbon. Traditionally, our operational carbon, so emissions attached or linked to buildings and their energy use, has been dominant over the life cycle because energy, we use a lot of energy in our houses, they are often relatively carbon intensive, and this becomes a huge share. But the ongoing change and the growing importance of embodied carbon is based on that we build more and more energy efficient buildings and we get more and more energy efficient products, and the increase of renewable and fossil-free energy. Basically, over time, on an overall perspective, reduces the importance of operational carbon. And in an extreme case, on project level, for example, you can already have 100% renewable energy, either produced by yourself or just your energy supplier has that. And basically what is left then to handle in that case would be embodied carbon. So basically carbon that is attached to materials. So carbon focus can be different in the different use cases. I would like to simplify this a little bit. So looking at the whole life carbon of a building, and in this case of a new building, you can distinguish between 100% renewable and the regular energy mix. And as I explained recently, 100% renewable, you have embodied carbon left to manage, to reduce. If you have the regular energy mix, it is most likely that the operational carbon is still dominating. And we have strategies for those because they are energy related. This is what the industry is working on. And when we have an existing building, we have the same logic, 100% renewable energy or the regular energy mix. You have embodied carbon again in the renewable energy case. And when you have just a regular energy mix, it depends a little bit on the case or on the project, because many of the carbon drivers in a building, in an existing building, they're already in place, like walls, windows, roofs, and structural elements. And in a renovation, interior and technical installations are often in focus. On top of that, from a corporate perspective, carbon accounting is increasingly important legislation, but in general, looking at those, here I have two examples of property owners and installers. You don't have to read the numbers because the message is basically that the so-called scope 3 emissions of the value chain upstream and downstream is very, very large. Is for many companies 70, 80, 90% of their carbon inventory and their performance. And very often for building or construction companies, this is dominated by materials or waste. And in other words, that is embodied carbon. And strategies for that, there are not so many yet, but circularity has probably a good and very potent potential. So when going from a more linear economy towards a more circular economy, you can do that in different ways. And there are many illustrations that you can find. But in order to explain this a little bit, you find the so-called R strategies or re-tactics. There are different wordings on that. So at the very bottom, you can see that the useful application of materials like recycle and recover, they are known. Many of these strategies and tactics, they are nothing relatively new. But then if you go more to a circular world, you extend lifetime of products and parts. For example, through reuse, repair, refurbishment, remanufacture, or repurpose. And if you really go further, you start to refuse things to do in some cases. But that's relatively hard and challenging. And you start to rethink how you can do things and achieve the same thing with less environmental impact and resource use. You can also reduce. And these kind of underlying strategies here, they are very much the core of circular economy. And in that, I take the liberty to give a slightly personal view and take it as it is. But I would say that some of the strategies, they are more promising and a little bit clearer in the near-term future for technical installations. For example, reduce, and refurbish are probably very promising and potent in the near future to apply when it comes to the transition to circular economy. The traditional ones like recover or recycle, they have been very good in a linear world, but in a circular world, they are sort of almost the worst solution. So one of the key takeaway here is obviously that these strategies are not suited for everyone in every case. It can be different on product or company level, and even on a project level, it can be different, which is the most suitable one. And what is important to understand that all of these strategies usually impact the embodied carbon performance, and they are significantly lower in many cases because you have non-virgin components or ingoing materials. And that usually reduces the embodied carbon impact. It depends on what you do. It is usually not going zero, but one example, if you reuse one product and just give it a second life, the carbon load for the first lifetime is taken there 100%, and the second life, a little bit simplified, is zero or close to zero, depending on what you need to do to give it a second life. And that basically, I try to outline here that we see the link between technical installations and circularity, and basically what are the underlying metrics. And also, we may have already some questions in the audience.
Thank you, Mirko. We don't have any questions in the chat yet, but please feel free to put questions during the webinar. But of course, this is a great introduction, Mirko, to the topic of today. So thank you for that. And your key takeaway is that there is a shift from operational carbon to embodied carbon. And as we are replacing more and more fossil fuel energy sources like to solar, wind instead, the focus will be more towards the embodied carbon, as you say. But at the same time, we are trying to get the EU member states to start harmonizing the rules when it comes to EPD. And it looks very different in different member states, doesn't it? And what kind of prerequisites you have in the different states. And as a provider of technical installations, what demands do you think will it put on us as suppliers in this chain? Will there be more need of specialized knowledge, or what do you say, Mirko?
Well, on a short-term perspective, I would say it's the challenge to manage the different trade-offs that you have on this transition at the moment, both on competence. I mean, you have in different countries different experiences and different habits to do things with technical installation, and in many cases they are not large-scale circular or reuse or upgrading. So, and everything since we started industrializing has been optimized for a linear way to do, and that is about to change. And a lot of questions are attached to that, and that is country specific, but also product and industry specific.
And Louna, do you have any comments to this? What do you think will come up as a demand on suppliers? What will it take?
I think there are different demands. I think, well, regulation is of course one clear demand that will change in the future, but I hope that it will be more from the customer side, and I also believe on that, and we will hear more about that today, I think, in my presentation at least. So I think there are both like ways that the companies are willing to move more circular. They see the potential, the business potential in it, but also that there's a push from for example, from the regulation and also from the material side, that we've seen that the price of materials, for example, is increasing, and you need to think about other ways to do business already today.
Yeah, thank you. Mikael, do you have any comments?
No, I think it's been wisely put, both from Mirko and Louna. I think the challenging part is to understand the circular model and understand what kind of behavior change you need to do as companies, as industry, as decision makers. So we are in the process. I would say probably just started when we're talking building industry. But then we started. And I think we will highlight some of the answers probably on your question during the presentations.
But then let's move on in the presentation a little bit and hand over to you, Mikael, who will talk a little bit from the property owner perspective. What could be interesting for them and what's in it for them in this model?
Yeah, for sure. I think that is a very vital part to understand the kind of end customer perspective. And of course, this, what I will say now is based on a lot of discussions that we had, me personally, with real estate owners or investors, but also on studies that we've seen published just recently. And you're touching into some of those questions already, both Mirko and Louna, in your answers. We see that legislation is picking up, putting new demands on the industry and the building industry itself. We see the increased demands, especially when you're talking climate reporting, like CSRD, with the climate transparency put on companies in all over the stakeholder chain. But we also see steering legislations becoming more and more active. We see it in some of the countries, very specific. But we see also financial steering legislations popping up or becoming more and more relevant for the property owners or the investors. And moving to that a little bit more, maybe, and put the focus on the financial investments, I see or I hear a lot of discussions regarding green fundings. And there are a lot of investors that has green asset or financial assets available, and you need to match that kind of or align towards that kind of demand. Especially, I would like to point out the EU taxonomy there. It's been working now for a number of years. All the chain of stakeholders are starting to work with it, and that is a typical way of steering financial activities towards green or sustainable actions, where actually green fundings are really pinpointing it. It's really it's a beneficial part for the journey towards a sustainable market, but also a circular market, as we will talk more or less during this webinar. And if you're really interested in this, the Objective 4 in the taxonomy, quite newly published, is just focused on this area. So more or less whatever we do in this area, from the real estate owner to the installers, consultants, down to the manufacturer side, are applying to a circular financial activity. So it's really interesting, and we need to be even more clear on the aim there. Of course, going circular also helps in some way to lowering the cost for the investor or property owners. We can talk, you touched into that already, Mirko, talking about material choices. You can assume less weight, for example, for a product or systems. We need to understand the supply chain logistics. How can we correlate transportation with each other, for examples? But we also see the big part, as you're touching into as well, we talk of energy use. If you're looking at the EU, Green Deal, Fit for 55, talking a lot about energy use. And here also circularity has a role to play. We see, when we look at studies quite newly published, that a circular mindset or a sustainable mindset actually reduces the operational energy by 10%, just more or less immediately, and more over the years to come. One thing as well, what is important when you're talking investment is, of course, asset value. And we see studies published, you will see them if you Google on this, where there is some proof that the asset value for a green building or a certified building is higher. You can see values about 5 to 15%.
Yeah.
It will vary, of course, over what kind of buildings we're talking about, where you are in the world. But it's interesting anyway to see that it seems like a green or a certified building provide less risk for the investment. And also, some of the real estate owners I'm talking to say it's a more attractive building, both as an owner, but also as a tenant to be in. And that in itself actually raises the bar. Tenants, if we're talking about that, there is, of course, a connection to rentable spaces. I saw a study just recently saying that a tenant value or a rent income value can be increased by 10% if you're talking sustainable or green buildings. So there is a clear financial focus in this as well. I'm obviously not a real estate owner, but we're talking to a lot of them because we need to understand what are the driver behind this transition. And I think the financial value cannot be underestimated. It needs to be there, and it's clearly. I just talked to one real estate owner just 1 week ago, saying now we see clearly a customer in their perspective, the tenants, putting some real demand regarding circularity, but also sustainability or ESG in general. And of course, attractive buildings will be attractive for tenants as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think I stopped there, but otherwise I will
Thank
talk
you,
too
Mikael.
much, probably.
This is all very interesting, and we will see how it all develops. And there is a lot of financial incentives behind the sustainability motivators for property owners, of course. And green loans and green funding, it's quite relatively easy, at least, to grasp. And it also means that the investors are influencing the change and also driving the change in some ways. So it's also important that they have a knowledge about this as well, of course.
Yeah, but and you need, of course, to understand that a lot of responsible companies in the whole stakeholder chains put their own sustainable goals. And they can be real estate owners, but they can be tenants as well, as everyone. So it's a kind of chain of command.
Yeah, but if we move then from the value and the green loans and the green funding of these investments, when we go back to the technical installations, the value of those and the reuse of material, how do you think property owners will look at that in the future, the material assets? Will they start creating material banks with their own assets, or what do you think will happen?
Yeah, it actually happens already in reality, especially if you take the Nordic Europe in focus. You will see real estate owners already starting to build their kind of material or product kind of asset value where they actually physical put things that will be reused later on. So that is already happening, still in a small scale, of course, but it started, and that's the main part of it. I think the next level of that is that when we'll start to talk reuse in a more wider perspective, not just picking things from one building to each other, instead of actually refurbish things, prolong their lifetime, maybe extend an already exist or an ended lifetime with a new lifetime. And of course, that will be a much better way than scrapping it and continue with the linear economy, as we said before.
It's about
so this is a behavior.
It's about preserving value that you already have created, and you destroy value by scrapping it. Just simplified.
I was just actually on the phone yesterday with a real estate owner in just this discussion. How can we preserve the value and in reality have a less climate impact, starting to renovate or build new buildings.
Any comments further on this, Louna?
No, I think Mikael very well put it in words. Yeah, I would say that we have already very good examples of existing building products or especially buildings where these things have been piloted or even scaled a bit. For example, I will tell a bit more about our collaboration with Vasakronan, but for example, Vasakronan is a great example of a property owner who is already doing these things and with the aim to scale it and not just like try things out, as Mikael said, that we need like larger scalable solutions and not just like one product going to another building, but it's possible already today.
Yeah, that's great. And now actually it's time for you, Louna, to tell us about your very interesting project that is addressing these issues and looking into how one could collaborate and find new ways to do a circular business model. So I will hand over to you now.
Yes, thank you so much, Åsa. And thank you for inviting me here. It's great to be here and tell you a bit more about our collaboration. So my name is Laurila, and I work as a business development manager at Combient, and I was the project manager for the circularity development program that I will now introduce. And as mentioned, I will briefly share some key learnings and an overview of the program. On the next slide, so before I go to the program, I could quickly say a few words about Combient as a company, because I think not maybe that many of you know Combient or Combient. So Combient is part of the Combient Group, which is a Nordic innovation network of 36 leading companies, and you can see all the logos on the slide who are now members. And Combient's goal is to support the digital and sustainability transformation of these associated companies. And Combient is the newest capability in the network with the goal of creating low carbon and circular value chains. So we develop impactful and sustainable multi-company solutions together with the Combient companies, but also companies operating in their value chains. But then next slide to the program then. So I already mentioned Vasakronan quickly, so I will first say a few words about the background of the program, so how and why it was initiated in the first hand. So in 2022, we came together with Vasakronan, which is part of the Combient network, to discuss what we could do together to speed up the circularity development in the construction industry. Because Vasakronan has very ambitious climate goals. For instance, their target is to use only renewable, recycled, or reused materials by 2030. But we all know that the road to reaching this target fully is still very long. And at the moment, it is not possible to build a whole building with this criteria. and rapid actions throughout the value chain are needed, therefore. And when we studied this topic a bit further, so the kind of how to reach this goal and what are the bottlenecks and opportunities, we found out that the technical building products present one of the largest emission sources in the buildings after energy use and the main construction materials. But at the same time, we couldn't find many, or actually barely any, circularity development initiatives focusing on that specific product category. So therefore, we decided to deep dive into the topic and studied what are the biggest challenges at the moment, and also the opportunities for developing more circular technical building products. And the results of the pre-study showed that there are some barriers, of course, for developing truly circular technical building products, but also that there is a great opportunity in reducing the emissions from such products when embarking on the circularity journey. And we, of course, want to focus on the opportunities. But most importantly, when we interviewed a few technical building product providers, they all expressed a very strong eagerness to transform more circular, but acknowledged also the need to collaborate with peers and customers and other stakeholders from the construction value chain. Then the next slide. So based on the pre-study findings and the needs of the companies that we interviewed, we then at Combient created the Circularity Development Program that was aimed for technical building solution providers. And the goals of the program were to increase the understanding of the value and potential of circular economy across the companies, and then provide practical tools for developing circularity in the organizations and with partners along the value chain, and also peer-to-peer learning between different companies, and also direct feedback for development from a leading real estate owner, and in this case it was Vasakronan. And if we go to the next slide, we can see that the participants of this program were Assa Abloy, Kone, and Swegon, and Vasakronan participated in the program as a customer supporting the companies in their development work. And the program lasted 1 year. We started in February 23 and ended the program this February. And it was run through 6 different sprints where circularity in technical building solutions was extensively covered from different perspectives. So you can see the 6 different sprints on the slide. And also, as we know, circularity can't be reached alone. So one company cannot do it alone, which is why we brought different stakeholders from the construction value chain, but also interesting case examples from other industries into the sprints. And on the slides, you can see all the different stakeholders who participated in our program during the last year. So quite impressive number of stakeholders. But then to the learnings. So what were the key learnings of the program? So the first sprint that focused on understanding the customer gave a base for the companies and their product development work from the customer point of view by reviewing the customer expectations and needs regarding circularity in technical building products. And we learned that in circular economy, instead of focusing on a single customer need, for example, your direct customer, you need to plan and consider actually the entire loop. So customers, and also suppliers. And in addition, construction sector's decision-making has been very siloed. So emphasizing the need for new collaborative procedures and early communication between, for example, manufacturers and other value chain members is a must. Then the second sprint, which focused on measuring impact, gave an overview of different circularity measuring practices and their adaptability for the companies, which helped then the participating companies in assessing emission reduction and circularity potential and defining circularity development priorities. And we learned that measuring circularity is very complex, mainly due to the lack of standard measurement frameworks and also a common language, but also a limited circularity data availability. But therefore, new ways of sharing information throughout the whole value chain is required. Then the third sprint focused on how to maintain value of products and components after the first use cycle, as actually Mikael just mentioned, and how to capture value from end of first life products through dismantling, reverse logistics, and take-back systems. And we learned that shifting from a linear business model to reverse logic requires the creation of entirely new processes that do not exist yet in the linear model. And in the circular loop, many stakeholders must adapt entirely new roles, impacting also costs and business logic. Then the fourth sprint, product life extension, focused on extending the lifetime of products by opening the circular economy tactics of reuse, refurbish, remanufacture, and resell, and also circular design. And during this sprint, the company studied which tactics are suitable for their context and drafted the lifetime extension plan for the chosen product. And we learned that in extending the lifetime of products, circular design is in pivotal role for allowing circularity in the future. But at the same time, we need to also address the value of existing products on the market and try to extend their lifetime as well as possible. So we need to focus on two things, kind of. So circular design for the new products, but also the tactics to extend the lifetime of the existing products. Then the fifth sprint focused on the circularity transformation by sourcing circular inputs and considering circularity in procurement practices. We explored the landscape view on future material flows and benchmarked leading circular sourcing practices and also looked into circular procurement development in construction projects. And we learned that driving circular procurement and sustainable sourcing practices requires a collaborative approach across the value chain and creates new types of relationships. For example, customers may now become suppliers of used products. And also, as a key function, sourcing has the power to operationalize and scale circular initiatives in companies. And then finally, the last sprint focused on how to build internal alignment to drive circularity. So the sprint supported the companies in scaling circularity internally in their organizations by identifying internal processes, practices, and competences that either hinder or support the transitioning to circular economy. And we learned that scaling circularity internally demands a shift in organizational culture, processes, and capabilities, requiring a lot of education and training, collaboration across functions and also value chain, and of course, a long-term vision for circularity. And also that the commitment to change throughout the whole organization is best achieved by executing both top-down strategies and scaling bottom-up pilots. So that was now very briefly about the overview and key learnings of the program from my side, but if you want to learn more about the program's insights and the participating companies' outcomes from the program, you can find those from our website, and I can actually maybe link the website on the chat a bit later. And
Great.
also, maybe.
And Louna, will you have a continued of these projects or?
Yes, exactly. That was actually what I was going to mention, because we are also running the program again this year. So it will be the second round of the program. We will start later this spring. So if you are interested in the program, please be in touch and I'll be happy to share more info about it, because it's still possible to join the program.
That's great. Thank you, Louna, for sharing these great findings and learnings of a very impressive project, I must say.
Yeah.
It seems that there is a lot that you can do as a supplier in the building industry. But what are the biggest motivators you think for the suppliers to work with these parts?
So the biggest motivators for the suppliers?
Mm.
Well, maybe I would say Mirko would be then the right person to answer this question, actually.
Yes, I mean, one strong motivation is obviously to complete an offer, what is actually demanded and required, and it has not just environmental but also economic potential that is extensive. And as a responsible stakeholder, that's sort of what you want to do. You know, you want to be economically viable and prosperous, but reduce your environmental impact at the same time. And then you also need to consider the social part of that as well. And here, circularity has, takes many boxes, so to say. It is an attractive thing. You can see that in other industries, but slightly also in our industry, that it is promising and requested.
We have some questions in the chat, but I think I will save them because they are product orientated. So I will save them a little bit for later on. But if you have to find 2 key learnings out of this Combient Pure project, where you have collaborated with different suppliers in the value chain.
Yes, I mean, Swegon participated in this, and I was the project leader for Swegon in this project of Combient Pure. And the very appealing part of this is to learn from other stakeholders and have basically almost a private program where you can ask questions and you can learn from them and their experience. And we share basically the same challenge to transition to more circular economy. And that goes only by peer learning and collaboration. I will go into this in a little bit more. So,
any comments from you, Louna, about this? What would be the 2 key findings from all of your good findings? What's the most important?
Quite the same what Mirko said, but I would still like address and or I would say the importance of truly being open to collaborate and actually share information with other stakeholders, because it's always emphasized that circular economy and circular loops can be reached alone, but we still see quite little collaboration focusing on circular business models. We have a lot of groups, I think, where we can discuss these topics, but when actually doing things like developing together, there are not that many groups working together on this. So that way I would emphasize like actually being open to collaborate and share even critical information in order to be able to develop these circular loops. And then maybe second learning, even though the transformation to circular economy is quite slow and difficult as well, and we tend to recognize the challenges around this topic, but I still want to emphasize that it is already possible today. And I think Swegon is a very great example on this, and Mirko will share more about this a bit later. But want to emphasize that it's already possible today.
So then the magic question to you, Mikael, will there be any linear business models left in 15 years?
Thank you for that question.
Or how fast will this go,
But
as Louna
that's
said?
an interesting question, and there are several answers probably on that. And the more idealistic would be to say no, but that will not happen. It will for sure be a combination of linear and circular business models. Now we see the circular business models just arise. They will probably be a huge part of what we are doing. But we still probably need to have a linear business model up and running as well, but maybe in a sustainable format. I mean, I talked already before about material choices. So we need to have a linear business model with less heavy climate impact. But it sure needs to be there. I see a future where we have a hybrid between different components, building houses and facilities, where you can reuse some part and you need to have other alternatives for others.
And we actually have a question from José Amaral. How do you estimate the impact of the ERP regulations on the evolution of the technical solutions of the buildings? The units of today could not be more than scrap in the future because they are not allowed to be used anymore due to the requests of energy usage.
Thank you, Jose, for that question. And I think we can also probably answer all of us on that question. But I think you're putting something very vital on the table. We see that we can reuse already parts of the material that sits in the buildings. We see with today's legislation that other parts are harder. And to be really honest, of course, some legislations I put on the table before as a taxonomy, CSRD, ERP, as you mentioned yourself, EPD, etc., drives in a certain direction. But we still have the building codes, and those are very local. And so far, we see very little change in those. And we need probably as an industry, as a whole industry, from real estate owners and the whole value chain, need probably to raise this question and also to understand what are the limitations, where can we draw the line. And this is more or less what I discuss on a daily basis now, because we are challenging the current infrastructure and the current business models.
Just a short addition here, just to your question. Just imagine that you're the company basically being able to update, upgrade, or modernize basically the older units to the current ERP standard. That probably is environmentally good and probably economically relatively promising.
Yeah.
So I would say that can be.
You can do this in different ways. So let's dive into that, Mirko.
I think you might show a real case on this.
Show how in practice we had worked with Swegon as a company in this Combient Pure and in other ways internally, how to reduce the carbon in the value chain.
So I mean, as Louna outlined, there's lots of interest, lots of communication on this. I will try to show some practical samples how you can manage embodied carbon, not of all technical installation, but in our case of HVAC solutions, so heating, ventilation, and air conditioning solutions. And with the increase of data availability on technical installations and then HVAC systems, you also get more studies, more academic research on that. What is actually the impact? Here I have one example from Chalmers research for a Swiss office building, I think built in the 2020s-ish, looking at only the embodied carbon of HVAC systems over the lifetime of a building there. And here you can see that the distribution of the impact loads are relatively different, and two in this case dominate: mechanical equipment and ducts and pipes. For some not surprising, for some maybe new information. And they published that the HVAC system can be as much as 15 to 36% of the embodied carbon of a new building, which is quite significant. And even in renovation projects that I mentioned earlier, it is very likely that some of the heavy carbon drivers, like walls and structural elements, they're already there. But in a renovation, you have interior and technical installations that are being renovated, and the embodied carbon is significant for many of those. And you most likely then end up sooner or later, depending on who you are, on a list, on an overview of the embodied carbon and your inventory, same as you do probably with traditional parameters like function or price or energy consumption per square meter. And then you look at this and add a parameter of what is the CO2 performance per square meter. And here you probably derive that competition is added on a product and a systems level here on top of the traditional parameters. One of the as you asked previously, I will give some very short insights what our learnings were from the Combient project. We share obviously the ones that Louna presented, but when we look at understanding the customer, we see the demand is there and it's significant. But when you then talk to different stakeholders, you see that some of the details that in many cases are crucial, they are a little bit unclear. Measuring impact is difficult, can be for some, but it's very crucial in this development. You want to know where you are, your status quo, and how much you reduce. That's very interesting. But obviously, and for the early stage of this development, multiple definitions of what is circularity and what not, and how it can be measured is a little bit challenging. When it comes to the reverse logistics, you see that qualitative dismantling, demolition, in other words, traditional maybe, you say there you can start with preserving value, not just, take the sledgehammer and take everything out, throw it in a bin, and then, please, can you refurbish this? Probably value destroyed. But we also see new actors in order to do this. But obviously, some of the traditional actors, they also move in this direction. When it comes to product life extension, we realize that economic and environmental potential is huge there, and it's actually feasible when you start working on that. And progressing basically without having all answers, yeah, that is challenging for many, but it needs to be done in order to develop. The procurement part, so basically listening to the requirements of customers and how are they supposed to specify these parameters. That is obviously very interesting to know and understand the motivation. We try to explain. But also, if we want to offer more circular solutions, we always we realized what kind of dependence we have to our own suppliers, in the same way as a property owner has a dependence to their suppliers in this. And obviously internally, that needs, this is a very big transition and change that is happening. And the title of this webinar is Are You Ready? I mean, this change needs top management commitment. Otherwise, this is unfortunately, my personal view, not possible. You need engaged people in order to do this, because in the end, this transition challenges very hard your mindset, your culture, but also your physical linear operations. So there are big changes that need to happen in order to actually make this scalable and commercially viable. But coming to one of the biggest insights, and probably also the most interesting, is actually from a more holistic, that the challenge at the moment is balancing the people, planet, and profit perspective, so environmental, economic, and social over the product life cycle or the building life cycle. So in our case, we need to balance indoor climate, we need to balance the operational or embodied carbon, and obviously all the other project specifics and system solutions, and then price, obviously. And at the moment, it is probably difficult to get everything at the highest level. There is quite some lag, there are open questions. So you need to be aware of the trade-off, you need help and transparency in this collaboration to be aware of what is the actual focus and maybe preference for you and what can be done. So that is quite a huge learning, and I think we have progressed there quite massively. Louna's and Combient program helped us to actually then launch the so-called RE3 program. And we use this concept to target the embodied carbon specifically. And how can we do this? We do this by reducing, so we use or increase the use of alternative materials that have lower carbon footprint, but also design adaptations. When it comes to reuse, we talk about take back of products, refurbishing them, upgrading them, modernizing them, and reintroducing them to the market at a similar price and warranty condition as the corresponding new product. So giving it a second life, giving it a third life. And over to the revitalize, there it is about on-site update in order to extend the lifetime and add modern functionality. So it's like a refurb kind of perspective, but here we exclude traditional maintenance, repair, and then sell of spare parts. We continue to do that, but that is not in focus of this RE3 concept. And this concept is actually there to guide our customers or potential customers in this journey and transition, but also guide our own organization where and how we want to work. And some examples at last is how to do that in practice. Here we have two products, a sound attenuator and an air handling unit being produced in low carbon steel. And with that sort of low carbon material, you can achieve significant reductions in embodied carbon, up to 20 or 34%. But even when it comes to product groups like chillers and heat pumps, refrigerants is a very, very popular topic. Natural refrigerants like the propane, the actual global warming potential is close to zero of this. And this is also a way to reduce embodied carbon of this product group. When it comes then to refurb and reuse in practice, we have digital renovations of WISE systems where you prolong the lifetime of these systems and add functionality, but even physical updates, for example, for air handling units of our gold units, where you have a refurb kit to prolong that. Much less invasive into the building operation than taking everything out and in with a new one. And that can be done in different ways. But probably the aspect of reuse, where most collaboration is needed throughout the value chain. We have done this in a couple of pilot projects. Here is some pictures of where an air handling unit has been dismantled and then reverse logistic transported to the factory, and look how can this be done. And here we need to scale up and collaborate, and this is what we want to do more in the future. So I hope you find this kind of contribution information useful and insightful and maybe inspiring. And maybe there are some more questions in the chat, Åsa.
Yes, it is. And we only have 1 minute left
no
of the
way.
webinar. So I would say like this, that we will answer all the questions that are in the chat writtenly on our website. So if you go in there and have a look, we will come back with answers for all of the questions.
For sure.
For sure. And then I would like just to try to summarize all of this, because it was very interesting, Mirko, to hear that you shared all these examples. If you should take one key thing that you want to take away from this with circularity in technical installations, what would that be?
You need to learn to progress without having all answers in this case. And then that, in many cases is uncomfortable, but that needs to be done.
Thank you. And Louna, what do you take if you want to send a message?
Yeah, I could say maybe some few key points to take away as takeaways for the participants. So I would suggest to start by gathering an internal cross-function team from the organization. And as Mirko mentioned, it's impossible to do it without the top management support. So maybe start there, but also start to assess the circularity baseline and then set the targets for both long-term and short-term development. And also start development from the low-hanging fruits to gain knowledge and experience from circularity. And then, of course, collaborate openly with others outside your organization as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Louna. And Mikael, do you have some key takeaways?
I think I have two wise colleagues with me. Thank you, Louna. Thank you, Mirko. Maybe I will be more idealistic, maybe in my final words. I mean, the change is coming is the headline. Are we ready? No, we're not ready, but we're trying to be as much as possible, and we are depending on each other. And it is possible. It is possible. We see it already happening.
That's a great final word. So thank you to all of our panelists for this very good information and talking about the Combient Pure project, Louna especially. And we will also encourage you to go into Swegon Air Academy website to look out for the next webinar that also will be on a reference case with sustainability and decarbonization in the future. So look out for that. And from all of us to all of you, have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
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 Thank you.